My last name doesn't belong here anymore. You understand? Right. That's what my daughter-in-law said right in front of the mailbox while holding a shiny new plaque with only her name on it. She wasn't yelling. She didn't need to. The words were clean, smooth, final, like a signature being carved into stone. If you've ever stood in front of something that used to bear your name, only to watch it be ripped off and replaced like you were never there, please, stay with me until the end of this story. And comment where you're watching from. Have you ever seen something like this happen in your neighborhood? If you believe no one should be erased from their own family, please hit subscribe now. What I went through may be legal, but it wasn't right, and I want the world to know. The nameplate used to say, "The Harper family." My husband screwed it in himself, years ago. That same mailbox held birthday cards, letters from old friends, even the hospice invoice the day my husband passed. That little metal rectangle represented everything I had been part of building for 41 years. And now it was gone. Cora. My daughter-in-law had replaced it with a sleek, new gold plaque, Cora Langley and Eric. Just those names. Mine wasn't shortened. It wasn't moved. It wasn't even miswritten. It was removed. I've already forwarded your mail to the auxiliary box by the garage, she added, just trying to reduce confusion. Confusion, I was the one who had signed every tax bill for this house for 3 decades. The one who paid off the mortgage after my husband died. I didn't feel confused. I felt erased. She turned and walked back up the path, her linen dress catching in the wind, her sandals making no sound at all. I stood there for a full minute before walking around the side yard to find this auxiliary box. It was bolted into the siding, half covered by a climbing vine, painted the exact shade of beige as the house almost invisible, and it leaned slightly forward, like someone had installed it just enough to say they did, but not enough to show they cared. Inside, one grocery flyer, and an envelope from the senior center addressed current resident. Not even my name. That night at dinner, I waited for my son Eric to say something. Anything. He didn't. Cora served grilled squash and quinoa salad like it was any other night. She smiled and made conversation about decluttering legacy systems. Eric nodded. My grandson, Liam, scrolled on a tablet, headphones in. Finally, I asked, "Eric, did you notice the mailbox?" He glanced up, confused. "I mean the nameplate," I added. "Oh, yeah, Cora handled that. And you're okay with it?" He shrugged. "It's just a nameplate. Mom, just a nameplate." The next morning, I woke up to find the hallway wall where we kept all the family portraits was bare. The photos had been taken down. In their place, a wide canvas print of a mountain landscape with the words, "Honor the present," written across it. I went to the closet where the photos used to be stored. Gone. When I asked Cora later that day, she said, "Don't worry, I put them in a safe place." We're digital archives. We're trying to create more breathable space. Breathable for whom she smiled. Everyone. That same afternoon, I opened the cabinet where I kept my medications. My pill organizer was gone. In its place was a neat row of identical brown jars labeled in minimalist font focus, inflammation, energy. They weren't mine. "Your supplements are in the wellness drawer now," Cora said when I asked. "I simplified your regimen. Too many outdated pills. I wasn't consulted. I wasn't even informed. One by one, the pieces of my identity were being gently, quietly repackaged. And each time I questioned it, I was told, 'We're streamlining. We're decluttering. We're evolving. But none of it felt like growth. It felt like eviction. I've heard of controlling daughter-in-laws. I've read articles. But Cora didn't yell. She didn't demand. She simply replaced. Quietly. Systematically. And I started to realize this wasn't disorganization or forgetfulness. This was curation. Have you ever had someone erase your presence, not with cruelty, but with calm certainty? Have you ever watched your name, your face, your history slowly vanish while everyone around you pretends it's just redecorating? Please share your experience in the comments. I truly want to know, where do we draw the line between helping someone age and writing them off? I once believed that the worst thing you could do to someone was yell at them, but I was wrong. The worst thing you can do is ignore them while calling it kindness. The night before this all began. Cora had given me a candle labeled Transition and said it would help me sleep better. I thought it was sweet. Now I understand. She wasn't helping me rest. She was helping me disappear. But what I didn't know is that removing my name from the mailbox was only the beginning. It started the very next morning. I walked to the kitchen at 6:30 a.m., my usual routine. For the last 2 years, since moving into the in-law suite, I had always entered through the side hallway door that connected my space to the main house. But that morning, the door didn't open. I turned the knob. It clicked locked. Strange. I knocked softly, thinking maybe Liam had locked it by accident. No answer. I called out Eric's silence. I pulled out my phone and texted my son, "Can you unlock the hallway door?" No reply. After 5 minutes, standing there in my robe and slippers, I walked out through the garden, around to the front. That door opened immediately. Cora answered with her usual calm face and her favorite mug in hand, which read, "Curate your peace." "Oh," she said. "We didn't expect you this early. This early I come through that door every morning." She tilted her head gently. "We locked it for safety. Liam's been wandering at night. Don't take it personally." I didn't respond, because deep down, I already knew it was personal. That door had always been the quiet bridge between my space and the family. Closing it was more than physical. It was symbolic. The next day, I went to get my tea kettle from the upper cabinet. It was gone. In its place, a sleek white electric kettle I'd never seen. I found mine 2 days later in a box in the garage labeled duplicates. That same week, my slippers vanished, replaced with soft rubber-soled wellness sandals that Cora insisted were better for my alignment. She was always using that word, alignment, but it wasn't alignment. It was replacement. One morning, I noticed something even more subtle. The doorbell no longer chimed in my suite. It used to be connected to the main chime through a wireless extender, so I could hear when guests arrived. Now, silence. I checked the extender in the hallway outlet. Unplugged. Later that afternoon, I asked Cora, "Did something happen to the doorbell extender?" She smiled. "Oh, I forgot to tell you, we're trying to reduce unnecessary noise throughout the home. Sensory simplification." I stared at her. "But now I can't hear when anyone's at the door." "You're not expecting guests, are you?" I wasn't sure how to respond to that. One evening, Liam came home from school with a handmade card. I smiled as he passed me in the hall. "Is that for me?" He shook his head. "It's for Mommy's vision board." Cora appeared behind him. "We're doing family themes now." I waited. He didn't offer me the card. Later that night, I went into the hallway to water the indoor fig plant something I'd done every week since they bought it 2 years ago. It was gone. In its place, a small printout taped to the wall that read, "Shared zones are now closed for renewal. Please use your dedicated space to the fullest." My dedicated space. A wordless way of saying, "Stay out." Do you know what it's like to live in a house where you're not allowed to exist in the shared spaces? To be watched, not harshly, but politely, every time you step beyond your designated square footage? That's what began to happen. Everywhere I moved, a new, soft boundary emerged. The porch swing. Now part of Cora's meditation zone, the pantry shelf I used cleared out and replaced with herbal jars labeled Cora's Cleanse. The family calendar. Relocated to an app I wasn't invited to use. Even the fridge magnets had changed. Once they spelled out Nana's the heart of this home. Now they said minimal is mindful. I started to feel something I couldn't put into words. Not anger, not grief, displacement. But when I voiced concern, I was made to feel like I was being negative. Let's try to reframe. Cora would say, "You're not being pushed away. You're being offered new independence. Is that what it's called now? When they remove your keys, restrict your access, erase your photos, cancel your name, it's not rejection. It's a path to independence." Have you ever experienced this kind of quiet control, not shouting, not cruelty, just restructuring? If so, please share in the comments. I want to hear what you went through because so many of us are told it's in our head. But it wasn't in my head. It was in my kitchen, my hallway, my heart. That week, I noticed that I hadn't heard Liam call me grandma in days. He called me Judith. I asked him, gently, why? He said, "Mom says titles are limiting. Titles I wasn't a title. I was his grandmother." I went to Eric that night and finally asked him, begged him, "Do you see what's happening? I'm not included in anything anymore." He looked at me like I was confused. "Mum," he said, "you're still here. You've got the suite. You're cared for. What more do you want? What more do I want?" I wanted to be a person, not a placeholder, not a burden. Politely decorated with soft lights and diffused oils. Just myself. I began writing everything down. The locks, the slippers, the calendar, the medication labels, the title Grandma. Withdrawn. I kept a notebook, hidden behind the baseboard heater in my suite. I needed to track this. Not just for me, for my sanity, because when gaslighting is gentle enough, you start to question your own observations, and that's when it happened. I walked past the office door one morning and overheard Cora speaking on the phone. She was calm, composed. "It's going exactly as we planned," she said. "She's used to being silent. She won't push back. And by next month, the paperwork should all be processed." Pause. Then, "Yes. She's starting to pull away from the family, which helps. The transition will feel organic." Organic. That's the word she used to describe my removal. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a series of misunderstandings. This was a strategy. It wasn't about wellness or alignment or peace. It was about power. Have you ever felt your life being restructured while someone smiled and told you it was for your own good? If you've ever had your space, your name, your very role in the family redefined without your input, please tell your story in the comments. You might help someone realize they're not crazy, because I wasn't crazy. And what I didn't know yet was that this shift was only the first step in erasing me legally. I used to wake up to the sound of Liam giggling outside my door. Every school morning, like clockwork, little feet shuffling through the hall, his knock on my door, and that same request, Grandma. Can I take 2 peppermints today if I say please twice? That routine ended without warning. No knock, no giggle, just silence. I assumed he was sick at first, then maybe sleeping in, but by the 3rd day, I knew something had changed. I tried going to the kitchen during breakfast hours. The table was set for 3. My place gone. My chair replaced with a ceramic plant stand holding a white orchid. "Where's Liam?" I asked softly. Eric looked up from his phone. Cora started walking him to school. Bonding time. And he doesn't stop in to say goodbye anymore. Cora smiled from the sink. We're trying to create a calmer morning rhythm for him. Less external stimulation before class. External stimulation. That's what I had become. That afternoon, I called my old friend Lorna to talk. The line rang twice, then disconnected. I tried again. Number blocked. Blocked. I checked my contacts. Most were gone. Somehow. In the last month. My entire call history had vanished. Emails deleted. Facebook deactivated. When I confronted Eric, he frowned. "Did you forget your login again? Want me to reset it?" "I didn't forget it," I said. "It's gone?" "I'm sure it's just a tech glitch. Cora can look at it." I didn't want Cora looking at it. I wanted my identity back. Later that week, I went to the community center. It used to be my sanctuary Tuesday bridge, Friday quilting, Saturday book exchange. But when I arrived, I was met with confusion. "Oh," the receptionist said, "your membership was paused. Your daughter-in-law said you were resting indefinitely." I didn't pause anything. I sat in the car afterward and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just looked long and hard at the woman in front of me, hair brushed, lipstick on, coat zipped. I was still me, but to everyone else, I had disappeared. That weekend, the church sent a letter about missing me from choir. I hadn't received it. I only found it because it was accidentally delivered to the front mailbox, the one Cora had retired me from. I spotted the envelope poking out behind a delivery box and pulled it free. Inside was a handwritten note from Pastor Dean. "Is everything all right? Judith. We've missed your voice." I hid that letter in my purse, because I was beginning to realize even my voice had been taken. The next morning, I walked past Liam's bedroom and gently tapped on the door. Nothing. I opened it slightly and peeked in. He was sitting on the bed, staring at a tablet. "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered. He looked up, then back down. "Want to have lunch with me today?" He didn't respond. Before I could speak again, I heard Cora's voice behind me. I really prefer that he not be interrupted while he's resetting his energy. We're teaching him boundary-based living. I'm his grandmother. She tilted her head, and he's 7. He absorbs energy deeply. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't scold. She simply blocked later that evening. I heard her laughing softly in the kitchen. I stood just outside the doorway. "She's pulling back more and more," she said into her phone. "It's almost like she wants to be invisible." She paused, listening. I don't think she even notices the isolation. It's working. It's working. Those words rang in my head all night. I was being isolated and they were calling it success. That's what broke me. Not the silence. Not the missing calls. Not the way Liam had stopped saying grandma. It was the fact that someone could do all that to another human being and call it progress. I sat in bed that night and stared at the ceiling, wondering, have I changed? Am I the one retreating? Or am I being made to retreat? I looked at my notes again, the timeline of changes, the conversations, the missing items, the locked doors, the pieces lined up. I wasn't imagining it. It wasn't confusion. It was a quiet exile built one boundary at a time. And maybe that's why it's so hard to explain. Because people expect evil to look loud. But what happens when it whispers? What if manipulation doesn't come in the form of threats, but policies? Not yelling, but polite requests. Have you ever had someone isolate you using kindness as the weapon? If you've ever been excluded with a smile, please share your story in the comments. I think more people go through this than we realize, and your words might help someone feel less alone. Because I felt utterly alone. Until the day I overheard something so chilling, so intentional, it shattered all doubt. And from that moment, I knew this wasn't passive anymore. This was a plan. It started with a voicemail I was never supposed to hear. Hi, Mrs. Langley. This is Janet from First Trust. Just confirming your request to remove Judith Harper as primary on the household deed and transfer all digital records to your account. She paused. We're still waiting on one notarized signature to complete the property consolidation. Call me if you need assistance. Click. Mrs. Langley. Not Harper. My daughter-in-law had legally changed her name, but now she was trying to change mine off everything that mattered. I listened to the message again. Then a third time. She was transferring my ownership. That afternoon, I walked into the First Trust branch, heart pounding. The clerk at the front desk smiled. Welcome back, Ms. Langley. I froze. She looked up. Oh, I'm so sorry. You're Mrs. Harper. I nodded. She leaned in. You and Mrs. Langley have been in here so often lately. I got you mixed up. So often I hadn't stepped foot in that branch in over a year. Could I check something on file? I asked. I'd like to review my property documents. The original deed, if possible. She pulled up the account. Her eyes flicked across the screen. Then she hesitated. Looks like there's a digital transfer pending. The file is under verification. It's currently restricted. Restricted from whom? I asked. My voice sharp now. She blinked. From you. Technically. The access was reassigned as part of the consolidation process. I never authorized that. She looked alarmed. You didn't initiate this? No. She stood immediately. I'll get a manager. 10 minutes later. I was in a small glass-walled office, holding a printed copy of a transfer request with a signature that looked almost like mine. Almost. But I don't loop the tail of my H, and that wasn't my pen stroke. It looks like the digital upload was submitted via online portal, the manager explained. Sometimes these get pushed through if a family member has power of attorney. I never granted anyone power of attorney. He sat back. Well then. Mrs. Harper. You may want to speak to a legal representative. Quickly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying all the moments I hadn't questioned. When Cora offered to help me digitize old documents, when she asked casually if I ever thought of streamlining titles, when she changed her last name and subtly removed mine from the mailbox. This wasn't a phase. It was a campaign. And I was the target. The next morning, I woke up early and called my old primary care doctor's office to request my full medical file. The receptionist hesitated. We already sent those to the third-party provider. What provider? BrightPath Transition Services. I never authorized that. She paused. It was in the request we received, signed and notarized. From your legal rep. I don't have a legal rep. Her voice dropped. You may want to come in. When I arrived, she handed me a manila envelope. Inside were printed records marked with the words, Cognitive Observations, Phase 1. The file was labeled, Patient under Family Supervision for Mental Clarity Screening. I stared at those words. Family supervision? Phase 1. They were laying the groundwork. For what commitment conservatorship? The erasure wasn't symbolic anymore. It was procedural. Have you ever seen your entire identity legal, medical, financial redirected without your consent? Have you ever felt like someone is quietly folding your life into theirs, page by page, until your name no longer appears? If you've ever been managed out of your own adulthood, please tell your story in the comments. Because I think this happens more often than we dare admit, especially to people who don't shout, especially to women who are taught to be grateful for the help. I went home and sat at my small kitchen table, the one I used to share breakfast at with Liam, and unfolded every document. The forged signature, the bank flag, the Phase 1 medical file, the mailbox plaque with my name removed. The list was no longer just emotional, it was evidence. And I realized something very clearly. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were building a paper trail so that when I vanished, no one would question it. But I wasn't gone yet. I reached out to an old friend, Sharon, who used to work as a notary. I told her I needed help reviewing documents, discreetly. Then I called Lorna. Do you still have that copy of the trust we signed back in 2005? She did. We met in her garage late at night, under the hum of a single bulb. She handed me a thick envelope. I felt the pages rough, ink signed, witnessed. It was all there, including the clause that named me sole lifetime beneficiary of the estate, which meant Cora had no authority over the house, no matter what digital form she forged. I sat back in my chair, stared at the dim garage ceiling, and exhaled. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't confused. I was being targeted. Have you ever had a moment like that where everything suddenly makes sense and you realize the person you trusted was preparing the paperwork to replace you? What would you do with that knowledge? Would you confront them? Would you wait? Would you gather more? Please share what you would do and what you've done in the comments. Because I know some of you have had your own version of this, and I want you to know you're not the only one. From that moment, I was no longer afraid. I began to look deeper. The moment I found the notarized power of attorney form in Cora's drawer, I knew. It wasn't even hidden well, just filed behind a folder labeled Wellness Vision 2025. The signature at the bottom looked eerily similar to mine. But the date? It was dated 2 weeks after my hip surgery, a time when I'd been sedated, disoriented, and barely speaking full sentences. I never signed it. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window in my suite, notebook open, list growing by the hour. Deed transfer request. Power of attorney forged medical records routed elsewhere. Legal documents pending court date. Social access. Disabled family photos removed. Grandchild contact blocked. This wasn't disorganization. It was a playbook. The next morning, I left early before Cora or Eric were up and took the bus 2 towns over to visit Sharon McCall, my old neighbor and a retired notary. I laid the power of attorney form on her dining table. She scanned it quietly, then looked up. This isn't your handwriting, she said. Not even close, I know. I signed your mortgage documents back in 2004. I'd recognize your pen strokes anywhere. She opened her filing cabinet, and pulled out an old signature card from the bank refinance we'd done 20 years ago. She laid it next to the forged document. "They'll crumble in court with this," Sharon said. Still, I didn't rush. I needed more. I returned home and quietly set up my phone to record during breakfast. I placed it beneath the fruit bowl on the kitchen counter and let it run while I made tea. Cora came in, smiling, phone to her ear, on speakerphone. "I think we'll be able to complete the transition by the end of April," she said to someone. She doesn't have the energy to resist. Honestly, I don't even think she knows what's happening. A male voice replied. Muffled. "Just make sure everything looks voluntary. No legal loose ends." I didn't breathe. The voice. The words. The confidence. She wasn't just trying to minimize my presence. She was coordinating my removal. That evening, I backed up the audio recording onto a flash drive and hid it in an envelope behind the false drawer panel in my old sewing table. By the weekend, I had compiled 3 altered documents, 1 voice recording, 1 notarized witness statement from Sharon 2 calendar logs showing Cora accessing my accounts during medical appointments. I needed a legal eye. So I contacted Naomi Fields, an elder rights attorney Lorna had recommended weeks ago. She agreed to meet discreetly at a library conference room downtown. Naomi listened quietly, eyes sharp, writing notes in shorthand. When I played the audio, she looked up mid-sentence and said, "That's intent, that's premeditated, and it's admissible." She reviewed the power of attorney form, my signature samples, and Sharon's affidavit. They forged legal authority over your life, rerouted your records, misrepresented your cognition to medical professionals, and attempted to alter ownership of your estate. That's not just unethical. That's criminal. I sat in silence, not broken, not shocked, just ready. Naomi leaned in. "Judith, you have leverage now, and with your permission, I can freeze the pending property reassignment and file a fraud complaint." I nodded. "Do it." Have you ever had to become your own private investigator just to prove you still deserve your name, your space, your identity? Have you ever found yourself compiling receipts, timestamps, and witness lists not to build a case against a stranger, but against your own family? If you've ever had to collect evidence against someone you once trusted, please share it in the comments. There's no shame in speaking truth, especially when silence is what they're counting on. But I wasn't the only one collecting things. Because 2 days later, as I prepared to meet Naomi again and submit my complaint, I came home to find my suite unlocked. The flash drive was gone. The documents I had copied from the bank folder shredded, the sewing drawer panel ripped off. Cora stood in the kitchen, arms folded. "You've been busy," she said, flatly. I didn't speak. She stepped forward. "I suggest you take a break. You've been working yourself up over nothing. It's starting to concern us." And with that, she handed me a new file neatly stapled, a printed application for voluntary admission into a long-term restorative living centre, already signed. By her and Eric. But I hadn't signed it yet. Not yet. And I was done letting them write my name without permission. They always say I'm the villain, that I erased her name, her history, her place in the family. What they don't say is what she erased of mine long before I ever picked up a pen. I was born in a borrowed apartment, raised in silence. My mother didn't believe in praise. She believed in standards. "You can cry," she said once, "as long as you finish what's expected of you." So I finished every chore, every class, every exam, every invisible burden she stacked onto my shoulders. No one asked how I felt, only how well I performed. And when I married Eric, I thought I had finally entered a family that would see me not as a machine, not as a placeholder, but as a partner. Then I met her, Judith Harper. She was gracious, polite, perfect. She made casserole from scratch and folded napkins into swans. She remembered anniversaries and sent handwritten notes, and people loved her for it. I tried. God, I tried. I cooked. I decorated. I attended every family dinner, every church brunch, but I was never seen. She still sat at the head of every conversation, even from the other end of the table. She still called it her kitchen even after I remodeled it. I started to realize nothing in this house truly belonged to me. Not the plates, not the rituals, not even the holidays. I told Eric once that I felt invisible. He said, "You're overthinking it. She's just set in her ways, set in her ways." That's the polite way of saying unchallengeable. But I didn't come this far in life dragging myself from scholarships to full-time jobs to the illusion of stability just to be someone's unpaid assistant in her home. So I made a decision, not out of cruelty, out of necessity. I began restructuring. It started with the mailbox. You think that was about ego? It was about clarity. This was no longer her household. This was mine, ours. New family, new season, new alignment. She still had a room. She had tea. She had peace. But she didn't need to sit at the center anymore. She didn't need to be in every photo, every email thread, every PTA group. I gave her something better, elegant retreat, a quiet space, a path of reduction. But she didn't take it. She resisted, first subtly asking questions, poking around, then openly digging through files, calling lawyers, even planting recording devices like some dramatic victim in a crime show. Let me ask you something and be honest. If you were building the life you always wanted, the security, the serenity, the house that finally reflected you, and someone kept reminding everyone of what it used to be, would you let them keep rewriting your narrative? Would you tell me in the comments? I'm not afraid to hear it. Do you think trauma makes people heartless or strategic? Because when I changed my last name, it wasn't to erase her. It was to reclaim myself. I no longer wanted to carry his history, or hers. I wanted my own line. I wanted a family name that began with me. Does that make me cruel? Or does it make me honest in a way Judith never had the nerve to be? Yes. I filed the power of attorney. Yes. I started the conservatorship process. But only because she stopped participating in her life. She let her world shrink, and someone had to pick up the pieces. I just made sure those pieces fit a new structure, one I could control. Some people inherit a legacy. Some of us have to build it from scratch and protect it. And sometimes, protecting it means simplifying the variables. Judith is a variable, unstable, sentimental, attached to outdated roles, and she's starting to fight back. She's hiring lawyers, taking notes, whispering like she's in some espionage thriller. But what she doesn't realize is, I've been 5 steps ahead this entire time. I already redirected her records. I already froze her access. And this morning, I shredded every copy she thought she hid from me. She thinks she's gathering evidence. She doesn't realize she's playing inside a game I designed. I've spent my life watching how powerful women lose, and it's always the same reason: they wait too long to strike. I won't make that mistake. I'm ending this before she even knows it. It wasn't a lawyer, or a priest, or a family member who gave me the final piece of the puzzle. It was the mailman, Joe. I'd known Joe for 15 years, ever since he started the route through our neighborhood. He always tipped his cap, asked about my garden, and brought Liam a little sticker every Halloween. Lately, I hadn't seen him much. Cora had rerouted all my mail to the hidden box by the garage, and I rarely had a reason to intercept deliveries anymore. But that morning, I happened to be outside when he pulled up. "Miss Harper," he called, surprised. "Haven't seen you out here in weeks." I smiled weakly. "They've redirected everything? I guess I've been retired from the front yard." He chuckled. "That's actually why I wanted to talk to you. Something strange came through last week. I've been holding it." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a thick envelope marked "Confidential." "Settlement draft enclosed." I stared at it. "That looks important," I said. Joe leaned closer. I probably shouldn't say anything, but the name on the envelope said Judith Harper, retained for relocation benefit. It came from a private relocation law firm. I blinked. "Relocation, yeah. I didn't know you were moving. I'm not." He frowned. "Well, someone is preparing to back in my suite." I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside, a draft settlement agreement, terms for transferring primary residence rights to Langley Family Holdings, LLC, in exchange for long-term custodial care at a private wellness estate, Serenity Oaks. There it was again. Serenity Oaks. The same name that showed up on my medical reroute. This wasn't a plan to nudge me out emotionally. This was an exit strategy, legally wrapped, ready to execute, and I was never supposed to see it. I scanned the footnote on the letterhead. The document had been prepared by a relocation consultant named Teresa Lind. I called the number on the bottom. Lind Relocation Services. "This is Teresa speaking. Hi, this is Judith Harper. I received an envelope with your firm's draft agreement for my estate." There was a pause. "I'm sorry. Who Judith Harper? You sent me a relocation settlement I never requested." Another pause. "Then I was told you had reviewed everything through your family representative. A Cora Langley. She's my daughter-in-law. And I've signed nothing." "Well," Teresa said carefully, "this may be above my role. But that's extremely concerning. I've worked with many families, but we only proceed with full voluntary consent." I exhaled. "Would you be willing to provide a timeline of the communications you had with her officially? I shouldn't. But if you file a dispute through legal channels, I'll cooperate fully." That was all I needed to hear. I printed the agreement, flagged every inconsistency, and sent a scanned copy to Naomi, my lawyer. She replied 2 hours later. "This is exactly what we needed. We have her in writing." That evening, something changed in me, not anger, not fear, conviction. I finally knew what I was fighting, and how to fight it. That night, I texted Sharon, the retired notary, and asked her to come over the next morning. Then I called Lorna and said, "I need a witness." I began organizing everything. Timeline of forged documents, medical rerouting, bank access logs, audio recording of Cora's phone call now, the mailman's envelope and the relocation settlement. And then something unexpected happened. While reviewing the documents, Lorna noticed an email printed at the bottom of the settlement, a CC'd copy to Emily, Harper Langley Group, org. "Who's that?" Lorna asked. I didn't know, but the name Harper Langley Group jumped out. We Googled it. Turns out, Cora had incorporated a private holding company just 6 months ago. Its purpose: legacy property management for multi-generational estates, and the registered address, my house. That was the final confirmation. Cora wasn't just taking over my identity. She was preparing to make me vanish while profiting off my erasure. Have you ever discovered that the person closest to you had laid out a full legal infrastructure to quietly replace you, not just emotionally, but financially, operationally, socially, completely? If you've ever found yourself on the receiving end of a plan you didn't know you were in, please share your experience in the comments. It doesn't matter how quiet the betrayal was. Sometimes, the silence is the loudest part, because in that moment, I knew I wasn't crazy, I wasn't forgetful, and I wasn't alone anymore. Joe had seen it, Teresa had confirmed it, Lorna and Sharon had backed me. Now it was my turn. It happened on a Sunday, the same day Cora organized her spring equinox gathering. She called it a celebration of renewal. Just a few friends, she said. A small community brunch to welcome a new season of harmony. Harmony for whom the backyard was dressed in white and beige linen drapes, bamboo mats, silent fountains. A sign near the entrance read, Legacy, curated. I wasn't invited, but I attended anyway. Not in protest, in preparation. Because this time, I wasn't coming empty-handed. I wore my soft navy dress, the one I kept in the back of my closet for weddings or emergencies. I pinned my silver brooch, the one Eric gave me after Liam was born. I tied my hair back neatly. No drama, no shaking hands, just quiet certainty. I waited until the speeches started, until Cora stood in front of a crowd of 20 friends, neighbours, Eric's co-workers talking about intentional space and the sacred simplicity of uncluttered lineage. That's when I walked forward. No microphone, no stage, just me, standing on the lawn with a folder in my hands. "Excuse me?" I said calmly. The conversations died. Cora's mouth froze mid-sentence. Eric stood up slowly. "Mom, what are you doing?" "I just have a few things to return to their rightful places." I opened the folder. First, the forged power of attorney printed beside a sworn affidavit from Sharon, notarized and dated. Then, the email thread from the relocation agency. Then, the voice recording transcript where Cora had said, "We'll have everything signed by April, she won't even notice." Then, the settlement draft addressed to me, rerouted without my knowledge. Then, the incorporation certificate for Langley Holdings listing my home address as corporate headquarters. I handed copies to the guests seated closest. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I saw the expressions shift: curiosity, confusion, and then discomfort. Cora's colour drained. "This isn't the place." "It wasn't my place either." "Was it?" I said. "Not at the mailbox. Not on the calendar. Not in the hallway. Not on the deed." Eric walked toward me. "Let's talk in private." "No," I said, still calm. "We've been private too long." I turned to the crowd. This home was built by my husband and me. Every tile, every beam, every flower in the yard. And I was almost erased from it, not by accident, but by design. I held up the last paper, the original trust deed, with both our names. I was labelled incompetent. My name was removed from documents, from emails, from the mailbox. And all while being offered herbal tea and told to trust the process. Cora stepped forward. "You're twisting everything. We were trying to care for you. Were you?" I said. "Or were you just preparing to take everything while smiling, silence?" I turned to the guests. "I want you to imagine this happening to your mother, your grandmother, your neighbor. Would you call it caregiving? or quiet conquest? Have you ever witnessed a family gathering where the truth long buried was finally laid bare, where masks came off, and the language of wellness was peeled away to reveal plain, painful ambition? If you had been standing in that backyard with me, would you have spoken up? Would you have stayed silent? Tell me honestly if you were there. Who would you believe? Please comment below, not just for me, but for anyone else going through this kind of curated erasure. Your voice may be the one that helps them speak. Eric stood still. His eyes moved across the pages, scanning the documents. He looked pale, shocked. Maybe for the first time, he realized that silence had made him complicit. Liam peeked out from the patio door, holding the peppermint tin I once gave him. I smiled at him. Cora said nothing. She didn't deny. She didn't apologize. She simply stared as if recalculating. But I wasn't finished. I looked around the yard and said, "This isn't just a family issue. It's a legal one. And I've already filed everything. With a lawyer. With the court. With the people who still believe your name means something when you sign it." Cora's voice finally returned quiet, but shaking. "You have no idea what you've just done." I closed the folder. I know exactly what I've done. I've made the truth public. That's something you can't curate away. The guests began to stand. Some left quietly. Some lingered, staring at Cora like they were seeing her for the first time. The white tablecloths fluttered in the breeze. The legacy, curated sign leaned sideways, one corner falling off its easel. But the final shock hadn't even arrived yet. 3 days after the showdown in the backyard, we walked into the Santa Clara County Courthouse. The sun was sharp, the breeze cold, and I wore the same navy dress I'd worn that day, not for nostalgia, but for clarity. Naomi Fields, my attorney, walked beside me with a leather case in hand and an expression that didn't flinch. She had already filed the formal fraud complaint, already submitted the documents Cora thought she'd destroyed, already requested emergency injunctive relief to halt any legal transfer of property or medical authority. Today was about testimony. Across the aisle sat Cora, dressed in her usual creams and soft textures, flanked by her attorney, a sharp-jawed man named Laird Brennan, who looked like he'd never lost a case he believed in. Eric sat behind them, not beside, not close, just there. The judge, a woman named Angela Kinney, reviewed the binder Naomi handed her. "Ms. Harper," she said, glancing at me. "You've requested to present oral evidence alongside your filed statement." "Yes, Your Honor." I stood, voice steady. I recounted it all: the mailbox, the name removal, the medical reroutes, the forged power of attorney, the rerouted mail, the relocation agreement, the conversation overheard, the audio recording, the erased photos, the digital locks. When I finished, Naomi stood. "Your Honor, we are invoking protection under the California Elder Abuse and Dependent Adult Civil Protection Act Section 1 Fim 610 T." Judge Kinney nodded. "Alleging financial manipulation and intentional isolation of a competent elder." "Noted," Naomi continued. "According to California Probate Code, Para 4264 and Para 4701, no power of attorney is valid if acquired by coercion, deception, or forged representation. We have evidence that the signature was fabricated while Ms. Harper was under medical sedation." She handed up the forensic report, a sworn analysis from a handwriting expert, then the audio recording, then the notarized affidavit from Sharon. Then the direct communication from the relocation consultant confirming that Cora initiated the transfer without my knowledge. Cora's lawyer interrupted. Your Honor, this is nothing but a personal dispute, emotional in nature. There's no financial loss yet. Naomi cut in smoothly. She didn't need to steal the money to attempt the crime. She built the infrastructure, filed the documents, and proceeded to remove my client from every layer of legal and social identity. Judge Kinney turned to Cora. Ms. Langley, do you wish to respond? Cora stood slowly. Everything I did was to protect her. She was declining. She was confused. I simply filled in the gaps. Naomi folded her arms. Then why the LLC in your name? Cora didn't answer. Naomi stepped forward. Why remove her name from the mailbox? Why forge the power of attorney? Why hide the relocation documents until after the trust would have transferred? Still silence. Judge Kinney leaned forward. I've seen predatory conservatorship cases before, Ms. Langley. But what makes this one disturbing is how carefully you dressed it as care. She turned to the court clerk. I'm freezing all pending asset transfers, property adjustments, and medical authority claims effective immediately. Ms. Harper will retain sole control of her estate, her medical records, and all communication access. Cora's mouth parted, but no sound came out. Judge Kinney looked at her once more. You can call it compassion, but in California, we call it elder fraud. Naomi gathered her files. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just exhaled. 37 years of building a life, and almost 3 months of watching it rewritten, one signature at a time. As I walked out of the courtroom, Eric followed. He didn't say anything until we reached the steps. I didn't know. He whispered, You didn't want to. He nodded. Then, I'm sorry. I turned to him. I don't need sorry. I need space to exist. Without being edited. Have you ever watched someone weaponize paperwork and politeness to erase a person they called family? And when justice finally caught up, did it feel like enough? I want to know what you think. Was freezing the transfer enough? Or did she deserve more? Please share your judgment in the comments, because sometimes the law ends it, but the people decide what justice really is. I went home alone, not lonely, not bitter, just intact. I placed my nameplate back on the mailbox that evening, my original one, the one Joe had quietly returned to me days earlier. I ran my fingers over the letters. Judith Harper. All I wanted was to finally be seen as myself again. It's quiet now, not the silence of being ignored, but the kind that arrives when you finally stop explaining yourself. 3 months after the hearing, I hosted a garden brunch. Just 5 people, Lorna, Sharon, Naomi, Joe the mailman, and Teresa, the relocation agent, who ended up becoming an unexpected friend. I served my own lemon tea cake, just like I used to at church luncheons. The tea was hot, the tablecloth slightly wrinkled, and the flowers unevenly cut from my backyard. It wasn't curated. It was mine. Cora moved out a week after the court decision, said she needed energetic separation. I didn't stop her. I didn't speak poorly of her. I just let go. Eric stayed, but at a distance. He brings Liam over every other Saturday now. The boy runs up the walkway again, no more tablet in his hand. Just his backpack and a hug that actually wraps all the way around my waist. He calls me Grandma again, not because I corrected him, but because he remembered on his own. I didn't file a civil lawsuit. I could have. Naomi said the forged power of attorney alone could have guaranteed damages, but I told her no, not because I forgave Cora, but because I refused to let her define the rest of my life with courtroom transcripts. Instead, I started something else, a small newsletter, printed from my desktop, stapled by hand, and shared with a local women's group. It's called Unedited, every month. We publish one real story from a woman over 60 who was pushed out from her family, her job, her community, and then reclaimed space in her own name. We don't write in fancy fonts. We don't charge money. We meet at the library basement with donated cookies and cheap tea bags. But every story is real, and every woman is seen. Last month, one of our readers, a woman named Denise, stood up and said, "You know what's worse than being silenced? Being silently rewritten." I nodded, because I knew that story, and I had lived through it. I never replaced the mailbox plaque with anything fancy, just a simple brushed steel plate, J. Harper. No more, no less. Not because I needed people to read it, but because I needed to see it. If you've ever been pushed aside subtly, politely, systematically, and still found the courage to stand in your own name again, if you've ever had to rebuild your sense of worth from the ground up because someone else tried to assign you a corner, please share your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. And if you're that person right now, wondering if you're just being dramatic, wondering if you've imagined it all, let me be the one to say you didn't imagine it, and you're not done. You still get to write the next chapter in your voice. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories of truth, betrayal, and quiet strength, hit subscribe. There are so many women still waiting to be heard, and their names deserve to stay on the mailbox, always.